Mr. Alex Yam.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise in support of the motion. Thanks to the President. Please allow me to return to the theme that I had focused on in the last few years. And at the risk of repeating this ad nauseum, housing was, is, and remains the key pillar of our social compact with Singaporeans. And therefore, in our pursuit of a world-class city, one that is well-connected and admired, we cannot forsake the fundamentals. Our development in the last 50 years has been to place the survival of Singapore and the benefit to Singaporeans at the core. This we must not forsake in our next lap. I welcome the Minister of National Development's addendum to Madam President's speech, especially the reiteration that home ownership gives Singaporeans a tangible stake in our country and a critical sense of belonging. However, I wish to jump in immediately to address a hot potato that has resurfaced in recent months, especially in media opinion pieces, and this is the issue of 99-year leases. While it arose because of the collective sale fever at the tail end of last year, I think we should take the opportunity to address this issue now and head on. The furore that has surrounded it reflects how much home ownership has become part of the Singaporean identity. The passions that have heated up around its discussion recently are not so much a reflection of angst, but perhaps of genuine worry on the ground about how lease decay might fundamentally change the way we view our assets. For a long time, Singaporeans have known that leases will run down eventually. It's also not that the majority of flats will be reaching the end of their lifespan anytime soon. Only about 7% or 70,000 flats will reach the 50-year mark at the tail end of the next decade. In the context of the recent collective sale bubble, lease decay has also led to the unfortunate comparison of parity, that a 20-year-old apartment or 40-year-old HUDC project can undergo collective sale and thus monetize the asset for their owners and turn back the clock for developers seems somewhat unfair. Of course, there are major differences between both, but in situations like these, no amount of rational explanation can address the perceived unfairness completely. What was perhaps a non-issue just not so long ago has made a number of Singaporeans unduly worried. One homeowner I met recently shared how she was worried about not being able to sell the family flat in the future. She had never contemplated it previously. All of a sudden, in response to media articles, the family is now making plans, actual plans, to sell their 30-plus-year-old flat to purchase a newer one. Just yesterday, during my block visit, I caught up with two families. One was worried that their flat value will decline rapidly soon. Another mother told me that she was contemplating applying for the new projects in Tengah. Given their worries, you would be forgiven to think that this block that I visited is quite old. In fact, it is all of only 21 years old. It's a very, very young flat. So this reaction to lease decay has perhaps taken a life of its own. Ultimately, we all know that housing is fundamentally a depreciating asset in the long run. But for such widespread concern, I think some clarity from the ministry and the government is called for at this point in time. Because we cannot on the one hand say that home ownership offers a tangible stake, but at the same time have homeowners wondering how stable and lasting that stake will be for them. There have been a number of suggestions from honourable members of the House. I would suggest that perhaps a modified SIR system be considered in the future for expansion. Let's take this from the view that we are a land-scarce city-state. Even recent projects that we've announced means that we take over land from areas set aside for other developments in the past, like in Tengah, Paya Lebar, our airbase, Bidadari, a former cemetery, for housing development. At some point in time, we'll have to consider how much of land is left, and it may make more sense and be more cost-effective to eventually source some of the flats at the 60-year mark and re-intensify the land with topped-up leases. Older flats do take more to maintain. Those of us who look after town councils can attest to that. Constant piecemeal upgrading might not be the most cost-effective method beyond a certain age. China, for example, faces a similar dilemma to us, and their leases are shorter, 20 years and 70 years, some of which are coming up by 2030. Last year, Premier Li Keqiang announced that the government of China would be seriously considering a real estate protection provision, a change in the law to automatically renew the leases. But because it's such a complex issue, they have set up a committee to review this over 3 years. For us in Singapore, we're still some way from that magical age, but it doesn't hurt to consider long-term solutions now and reassure Singaporeans of their stake in the country. Related to the issue of leases is also housing for our elders. These are the builders of our nation. I therefore again welcome the Minister for National Development's addendum that a new model of assisted living will be piloted. We've seen one example of integrated elder care living in the completion of Kampong Admiralty. While retirement communities are one way forward, I also urge the government to also put serious consideration to help more elders age in place. My constituency of UT is an upgraders town, which means that many of our residents moved in their late 30s and early 40s just about 2 decades ago. These are their second flats, upgraded from their first matrimonial homes. After 20 years, this first generation of owners have aged as our town has matured. They like it here. It's a quiet town, homely, but they also worry. They want to stay where they are. Majority, however, are 5-roomers. They look at their 4-room neighbors and ask why the government will not extend the lease buyback scheme to them. Indeed, why not? Extend the LBS to 5-roomers. The government has already revised the flat sizes one before, they say. Attachment to a place gives a greater sense of belonging, especially to older Singaporeans. It's a place that they are familiar with, comfortable with. As more of these naturally occurring retirement communities are formed, early identification of demographic shifts will allow the government to plan ahead to put in place resources and facilities to cater for the needs of our elders. Of course, aging in place requires changes to be made. So the Enhanced Ease program will transform existing flats into those suited for our elders and the infirm. From my visit to older residents, some areas to consider include suggestions of lower wash areas, kitchen tops for elders dependent on mobility aids or wheelchairs. Like other honourable members, I also believe that technology will play a big part in our next lap. Beyond the grab bars, ramps, and accessibility ramps, connecting our elders to the wider world through technology should also be explored. Items such as home monitoring system, home alarms, elements that allow the home itself to take care of you. Preparing communal facilities in advance are also an important step. Let's take my constituency again as an example. UT is usually regarded as a relatively young town by our total population. So when I made the decision to convert one of our early childhood education centres into a senior care centre a number of years ago, I was asked why. But as I had alluded earlier, though we are statistically quite young, the transition to the silver years will occur in bulk once the first generation of homeowners enters their late 50s and 60s. Today, our senior care centre is already up and running and almost at full capacity. So if we had waited till the demography changed, we would have had to play catch-up. Over the last few years, I've also been urging the government to do more for singles. I'm therefore heartened that the Ministry of National Development has made significant changes to address the housing needs of our singles, including single parents and divorcees. Yet there are those who continue to find it a challenge. I therefore suggest that the government consider extending the short lease flats currently available under the Fresh Start Housing Scheme and the 2-room flexi scheme for elders to also younger singles. They must, however, adhere to the minimum 20-year occupancy period. Certain additional conditions contingent on employment and income can also be factored in. This will allow those who are lower to lower medium income earners who are singles to obtain a flat that might be out of reach for them on a single income based on the longer leases. I have encountered enough examples of singles, especially divorcees, who face sometimes unsurmountable barriers to their next housing option. Extending this additional option to them and other singles will similarly give them an opportunity to have a continued stake in Singapore. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in Mandarin. 安得广厦千万间，大庇天下寒士俱欢颜。 这是取自于唐朝诗人杜甫中的，他觉得为忧国忧民的这个心情。以白话来讲解，诗人在他茅屋被秋风卷走了屋顶上的这个茅草时，他质问：怎么才能得到千万间宽敞高大的房子，普遍的遮蔽天下贫穷贫苦的人民，让他们个个都可以开颜欢笑？已故本地著名书法家潘寿老先生就书写了这一行诗句，挂放在建屋发展局的大厅。这体现了我国政府把改善并提高人民的居住环境为己任的决心。新加坡可算是实现了诗人杜甫的理想，让居者有其屋。年长一辈的国人都应该熟悉我们1989年自治年代的屋荒的情况，导致社会不稳定。行动党政府将解决住房问题作为一项基本的国策。现今，我国可算是全球唯一近乎达到100%拥屋率的国家，这是我们应该觉得自豪的。在我们下一阶段的国家发展政策，我们不能忘记这一点。在追求现代化、先进化的都市的当儿，也必须把杜甫的诗句牢记在心，把人民放在中心，让发展围绕着人民的福利为基本取向。有望政府在新建的主屋区，让3代可以同居同欢，让不同族群可以和睦共聚，让不同阶层的国人能互相拥护挟持。在城市重新规划的方面，也希望政府能保留我们独特南洋的风貌，维护我们的历史，徜徉各族群的特殊文化。发展不能忘本。我们要创造的未来城市，一定要让国人有归属感，让人民认同，这才能显示出我们不只是另一个先进的城市，而是一个受人爱护的家。Mr. Deputy Speaker, Madam President in her address to this House said, and I quote, "With bold thinking, we will create a metropolis that will embrace the future. This metropolis must indeed embrace the future for Singapore to progress. Yet more importantly, this metropolis must embrace all Singaporeans in that journey of progress, or we will risk becoming no more than one of the many cities in the world, cold, utilitarian, and unwelcoming. So even as we embrace that progress, let us not forget that in our role as stewards of the future, we are also our brother's keeper. In the built environment, we must look after people and have them at the core. To the lonely elderly, may this new metropolis bring warmth and the comfort of friendship, of care. To young families, may this metropolis provide opportunities to excel in their work and also to raise a family in a supportive environment. To the disadvantaged and the disabled, may this metropolis be one designed with them in mind from the beginning, but not as an afterthought. For those as yet unborn, may this metropolis be a beacon of hope and light for future generations of Singaporeans, where every child, every life is valued, protected, embraced, and encouraged. Only then will this metropolis shine even brighter as a little red dot.